Hello, this is Paul, and this is an A Course in Miracles video. Today I'm going to talk about a topic and a phrase that many people are familiar with, which is nothing real can be threatened. And elaborating on this because there's a lot of truth in this, and if we expand on it a bit, you might see how it means a lot more than it just seems on the surface. So God creates heaven and creates his children and creates angels and whatever is real. And none of these things can be threatened because the idea of threat takes you away from reality. Now, the idea was that in our ego idea of separation, we attacked God, or we willed against God, or we sinned, or we did something to cause God to change, or we had a real effect on reality, or somehow we changed what was there and made it hurt. And this was a sin. But nothing real can be threatened. So this is impossible. And it being impossible tells you that when we try to attack, and when we try to oppose God's will, or we try to be separate, no matter how it appears, no matter how attacking it seems to be, or how much of a positive outward expression, like somebody attacking someone, it cannot be true that it actually does attack. The opposite is actually true. So that means that attack is actually the same thing as withdrawal. When you have attack thoughts, you're actually having withdrawal thoughts. So you think that you attack God by having this angry expression of going against his will, but what you actually did was you withdrew from God. And your attacks on your brothers were not really attacks on your brothers. You were withdrawing from your brothers. This is why you narrowed yourself down to become a body, isolated away from the rest, as an act of withdrawing from God and hiding from God. So even though it comes across as attack and as something that you think, okay, this is an outward expression, and it lurches at God and it throws weapons at God and tries to hurt things, that's an illusion. And really what we do is we recoil and withdraw. So when you try to attack anything real, or you try to attack God or heaven or your brothers, automatically you fail to attack, and automatically you actually withdraw away from them and only hurt yourself. It's similar also to power, where when you have power, you can only have power by sharing power with God and being in a place of love. God is love, and the only way to access his power is to be loving. If you try to use his power in an attacking way, you instantly lose that power. Because attack produces weakness, and separation is the idea of failure, and becoming separated and divided is a reduction in wholeness and a reduction in power. So automatically, as soon as you try to do something attacking, you actually diminish your strength and end up weaker. So the more vicious it seems in the ego, the more vicious that you seem to be attacking, the more weak you are and the more scared you are. And death itself is the ultimate attempted attack, in which it's quite obvious that you completely fail to do anything because you become dead. Instead of being able to actually cause something and make something change, you instead end up being the one who suffers and dies, and you become completely paralyzed and disabled and incapable of doing anything, and you lose all sense of causing anything in death. So it really is, even though it's an attempted attack on God's Son, it really is actually a failure to attack, and it's a withdrawal away from what is real. Now, the only way that you can access your brothers or access God is through love, because they are love and you are love in reality. So what that means is, like, say, here's you as love and here's somebody else's love. The only way for there to be contact is for you to join at the same level of love, and you can actually therefore then become very intimate with somebody in love. When you attempt to attack them or accuse them or sin, automatically and instantly you actually withdraw away from them, and you no longer communicate with love on a level of love, and now you kind of drop away from them and no longer are being intimate, because you can only have that oneness, and that joining of minds only can happen in a state of love. So as you try to attack or you try to separate or sin or judge, you instantly break down communication, and the communication that relies on joining of minds and sharing of love breaks down, and the communication channel is blocked, and therefore whatever you're trying to express that is attacking or vicious or angry cannot transfer all the way to your brother or to God, because the communication channel is broken down. There's a breakdown in communication. So now you become imprisoned, and you isolate yourself by doing that, and then you literally cannot access your brother. So the only way to get access and to plug in to your brother or to God and to share with them and to actually transfer something to them, love, is to love them. You have to communicate in a loving way with love in order for the communication to be able to be shared, because you have to be so open and allowing and non-attacking. Otherwise you produce interference with communication, and then you fail to join with them, and because you're not joined, there can't be a transfer of anything that you're trying to express. So when you're expressing anger and hate and attack or whatever, it fails to communicate. It is actually a failure to communicate anger and attack and vengeance. So it does not leave your isolated state of being separate. It stays within you and does not make it over to them. Now, the idea of sin is the idea that you somehow can maintain the communication channel and stay joined with your brother and with God, while at the same time attacking them. And it should be fairly clear that's not possible. As soon as you try to use your communication device to communicate the idea of not communicating, so any kind of ego attack ideas or judgments or hates or projections or anger, as soon as you try to communicate that stuff, it is actually, you're trying to communicate that we're not communicating, that we're on different terms and we're not seeing eye to eye, and we're not agreeing with each other, therefore we're not communicating. You try to communicate that, it fails, and therefore cannot go anywhere. And it is actually not a communication, it's a paralysis of communication, and you're not communicating. So when you can, communication is love and joining in love, and the opposite of that is not communication. So you literally cannot sin against your brother because to do so would require that there still be a open channel where you can access them, and something in you can go all the way to your brother and touch upon them and be intimate with them and join with them in order to access them, to be able to do something to them. And if that communication is broken down, you can't do that. You fail to communicate your attack thoughts. So that makes sin impossible. So you literally cannot hurt anyone, and no one can hurt you, and you cannot hurt God. As soon as you try to go into hurt or hurting or attacking, you are emphasizing separation. So if you emphasize I'm separate from you, and that's your attack, you're literally putting a wall between you and your brother, which blocks you and stops you from being able to communicate or transfer anything. So now you cannot access them, and therefore your attack cannot reach them. So they remain off limits to anything of the ego. Darkness cannot affect the light. The light always dispels the darkness. The ego and any illusion cannot attack reality. Anything that's not love is an illusion. So anything not loving is not really there, it's imaginary, so it cannot cause reality to change. That would be level confusion to believe that you on a different level can cause your creator to change. It's not possible, because you're being caused by God, you are created by God. He is the one who causes you, and you're the effect of him. So as soon as you believe that you actually have an ability to cause him and make him different and change him and affect him and do something to hurt him, you must have level confusion, because it's actually impossible. And even the idea that you can somehow have sin existing at the same time as God being love, and have the sin being able to make contact with love and affect the love is completely impossible, because being in the sin idea is a breakdown in communication, and as soon as you try to go into attack, you withdraw. As soon as you try to oppose God's will, your will becomes imprisoned. It's almost like a safeguard. It's like a safety mechanism, if you could think of it that way, that like a sort of you've got to use the system in the correct way and then it operates normally, but as soon as you try to use it in the incorrect way, a safety switch flips and there's a shutdown of your seeming ability to do anything, and the whole system freezes and your will becomes paralyzed and you fail to be able to do anything. This is built into the system. This is the law of God that you cannot change. You cannot will against God's will. As soon as you, in your free will, try to will against God to cause him something, or to cause your brothers in some way, it's an attack, and therefore it attacks your will, and your will becomes limited, and now you're not able to will, and you gain an imprisoned will. And the ego's idea of free will is actually a will that is imprisoned and cannot will anything. So as soon as you get into the separation idea, you're actually going into denial of your freedom and denial of God and denial of your ability to will and create and cause. It disables you, and now your will has been blocked by yourself. You're now acting against your own will. Therefore, whereas your will may have gone out without opposition, all of a sudden you are opposing your own will, and now you stop your will. So as you get into a split mind, your will automatically cancels itself and freezes itself and becomes imprisoned. And the ego's idea of free will, even if it looks like freedom, it's actually imprisonment, and you're the freedom to choose things that you seem to have in the world is really an illusion, covering up the fact that you are actually becoming very limited in what you can choose. And the ultimate version of the ego breaking free from God is death, where you are supposedly exercising the fullness of your freedom to want to be separate from God, but in so doing lose all of your freedom and become dead, so that you cannot accomplish what you were trying to accomplish. So anytime you try to attack God's will, your will stops being willful. You lose willingness. So just gonna have a little snack here. So the way things work, nothing real can be threatened. It's kind of like the only way to access heaven, or to access your reality or your real self, or the real selves of your brothers, is to be in a state of love. You have to sort of have the openness and the willingness and the receiving and the appreciation and the peace of mind is sort of the way that you gain access to heaven. It's the gateway to heaven, is having that that full willingness to share in love. You can only access something through sharing with it. You can't access heaven or reality or God's reality or your soul without being willing to share. And that sharing automatically requires love, because love is wholeness and sharing. So if you don't want to share and you want to be in a place of attack or judgment or sinning or being guilty or whatever, that's a breakdown in sharing, and it isolates and imprisons you, and it stops you from being able to share with that which is real. So you cannot share that hurt with reality. As soon as you go into any kind of suffering, you are going into not sharing and into limitation and imprisonment. And Jesus just gave me a vision of having handcuffs. You put yourself in handcuffs when you try to offend reality. It's kind of like there's like a mountain, and at the top of the mountain you can stand on the top of the mountain and be with God, but there's slippery slopes. And as soon as you try to take a swing at God and hit him in the face, you're going to lose your balance and you're going to slip down the slopes and go away from him and not be able to access. Just as a little symbolic kind of a thing. So in truth, anything that's real literally is beyond the reach of the ego. Another way you can see this is, imagine there's somebody's backyard and they have it fenced in, and there's a dog in the yard, and the dog is barking his head off because he sees you outside the fence. If you're in the yard with the dog and you're therefore in the same realm or the same level as the dog, and the same freedoms apply to you as apply to the dog can access you, and now you're in danger, and it can come along and bite you and hurt you. But if you take yourself out of the realm of that danger and go somewhere where it cannot go, you are safe. So if you go outside the fence, jump over the fence, and the dog cannot get over the fence, now you are safe because it cannot access where you are. It's the same thing as being in the light. The light dispels the darkness. And if you think of ego as darkness, like a pool of darkness, and the ego's made of darkness, it's not made of light. And above here, there's a pool of light, which is heaven. How does the darkness attack the light if the darkness has to keep being dark in order to keep being the ego? How can it go into the light and remain dark in order to attack the light? It can't do it. So as the ego cannot attack the light, the darkness cannot make the light change, because the light shines away the darkness. It's stronger than the darkness. It's more real. And the light is where there is power, and darkness is where there is no power. So anything of the dark, anything of the ego thought system, or the backyard with the dog in it, cannot even approach the light without being dispelled by the light. It will be shone away, it will be vanished, it will be disappeared and transmuted into light. The ego will disappear. So the ego thought system, the entire mind of the ego, cannot go towards the mind of the Holy Spirit without being healed, without being shone away, and light replacing it. So there's no way that darkness can stay dark and go touch the light and cause the light to become dark. And in the Course, there's also an interesting thing where Jesus talks about the belief that darkness can hide. which is similar to the clouds in the sky. So if you're on this side of the clouds and the sun is above the clouds, and the clouds seem to be solid and thick and dark and heavy, and they seem to be able to block the sunlight from passing through, and everything below becomes darker. This is an illusion. This is what the ego set up to symbolize the belief that darkness can block the light, and that these blocks to awareness, the clouds, can stop the light from getting through and produce an area that's in darkness. Because of the block, the clouds are symbolic of denial. They're blocked to the awareness of the light's presence. When you're on this side of the clouds, it seems as though they really have a power to stop, or to come between you and the light, to stop you from being able to be aware that the light is there. If you get in a plane and you go up above the clouds, now you recognize that the light of the sun is always shining. It's always there. It is not being blocked by the clouds, because the clouds are now down below you, and therefore you're always on the lit side of the clouds. The clouds always look light because the sun is shining on them, and therefore there aren't any dark clouds. This is a symbol for how the ego mechanism, that when you are aligned with God and you're up with the sun and you're shining with God in the same direction as God's light, you shine away the clouds, and the clouds don't matter, they don't exist. When you turn around and you try to look upwards at where the light's coming from in order to will against God's will, to oppose his will, to see in an opposite direction to how he sees, you will see blockage, and you will see as though this blockage is causing the light to be blocked in your awareness. And then you more easily believe the illusion that the light can be blocked by the darkness, and the darkness can hide the light, or that somehow darkness has some kind of power to make light go away, that the ego has power over God, or you can sin against reality, or you can change reality, but it's an illusion. You cannot do it. The darkness cannot cause light to go away, and even in this world, it is symbolized as when the sun comes out, there may well be shadows, but when the light shines where there was a darkness, the darkness is instantly disappeared. And the darkness is really only the absence of light, or the illusion that light is not there. When the light comes, that illusion disappears instantly, and there is no darkness. And the shadow just disappears. It's gone. It never was really a thing. It was just the reduction or the lack of light. So the shadow or the darkness doesn't have any power, even in physical laws, over light to cause light to go away. The light always has power over the darkness. So this is another way that nothing real, the light, cannot be threatened by the darkness. The ego cannot do anything to reality. So nothing real can be threatened. The shadows don't really exist. And in that awareness, you have perfect peace. Now, some people say that there's a war between the light and the dark. The fact is, the light doesn't even give attention to this so-called war. The Holy Spirit never attacks the ego. He just knows that the ego doesn't exist. Reality cannot be changed. You cannot be changed. You cannot change God. So in reality, God and everybody in heaven doesn't give a crap that there is a so-called problem or a war or a conflict or something's gone wrong or there's been a sin or people are being really killed and dead and suffering. And it knows that these are not true. They cannot be true because nothing real can be threatened. So every son of God in its purest form has never sinned, has never been changed, cannot be changed, will never be changed. You are still as God created you, still the same perfect divine being that you were created as. Absolutely nothing has changed to affect you. You have not sinned. You've not changed from innocence to sin. You have not gone into darkness. You have not lost anything. Nothing has happened. So, from their point of view, from the reality point of view, everything in this world must be a lie and an illusion. There is no real death. There's no real sickness. There's no real suffering. Every guilt is fake guilt. Every death is fake. Every bit of fear is made up. Every idea of sin is completely fake. There is no reality and no truth to anything in the darkness, anything in the ego. It is all 100% bullshit. So the light is not at war with the dark. The darkness is the idea of war and is the idea of a war against yourself. So the darkness can only attack the darkness. The darkness cannot approach the light. It cannot go into the light. It will be dispelled instantly. Nothing real can change. If nothing real can change and everything that's real is permanent, just to get this idea of permanence, it means fixed, absolutely permanently fixed forever. Cannot be moved, cannot be affected, cannot be hurt, cannot be damaged, cannot be vulnerable, cannot become sick, cannot die, cannot suffer, cannot be made different by anyone. No matter how hard you try, or how many different ways you try, you cannot kill yourself. Even if you kill the body, you still cannot kill what you are. You cannot kill God's Son. It's impossible. And Jesus says that you've tried to make a bargain with the ego that somehow you can produce the death of God's Son, but you can't. And even when you try to, and even when you seem to pull off death, you still haven't killed God's Son because it's not possible. You cannot die. You are immortal. You are always 100% immortal spirit. Spirit is in a state of grace forever, and nothing real can be threatened. And it's really reassuring to realize that nothing real can be threatened, because it means as far as your sane self is concerned, and God and everyone in heaven, you're just constantly in a state of celebration and joy and happiness and love and certainty, and knowing that there is no threat, and knowing that nothing can be attacked, and celebrating permanence and eternal life. And there's no fear there. There's no worry about attack. There's no concern. There's no shock and horror that something's gone wrong. It's kind of like the literal truth that there is nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to worry about. Nothing's gone wrong. Nothing has been hurt. Nothing can be hurt. And that brings peace. You can feel the peace that comes from this in just acknowledging that reality is unassailable to the ego. It is unchangeable. by any illusion. There is not a single speck of sickness and death that can even get near to it. A few years ago, when I had an experience of God, just afterwards, like a few minutes later, I was standing around and trying to understand what I was experiencing, and somehow a huge amount of joy was radiating out of my face and out of my body, and it was just this radiating, strong, outward extending of light, and it felt so secure and so strong in its expression that I felt as though if anything would even try to come close to me, attack me, or do anything to me, it wouldn't even be able to get close, because the radiation of that light was so powerful. It created kind of a buffer between me and others, sort of almost like being just wrapped in love, and so strong in its forceful radiating of light that I felt really secure and really safe and certain that nothing can come in. It was only an extending outward. It was such an outward expression of joy. I felt really, really joyful, and it was just another confirmation for me that when you're in the truth, in reality, you are perfectly safe, because extension protects you. It's like you allow yourself to receive God's strength and love and power, and you extend it out, and it's just this intense shining that any kind of illusion can't even begin to approach you and to come in this direction. Because if you think about causality, God causes you, and then you cause other stuff. When your will is acting according to God's will, you will proceed in that line. Jesus calls it a continuous line of creation, where will is unlimited in its power, and it extends from God out and extends through you and carries on extending in the same direction. When your will is aligned with God's will, there is just this extending out, this expanding shining of light and power. It's only when you buy into the illusion that something goes the other way, against the extending of love, against the will of God and against your own will, where you're trying to reverse cause and effect, and you're in level confusion and you've got the authority problem. That's the only mindset in which you start believing that stuff outside of you can come into you and cause you, because you now have level confusion, your perception's back to front, and you experience it as though things out there can come in the direction where the will is coming from and cause the light of your will to be impeded upon and attacked externally. Is very, very unnatural to be in that state of mind. You're actually supposed to be perceiving that all of God's love comes out of you with such intensity of radiation that it shines away anything that would even begin to try doing that, and makes you feel very strong and very safe and very unthreatenable. So nothing real can be threatened, and anything that's not real doesn't really exist. It must be an illusion. So any way that you think you can be threatened and attacked is not true. Now, God is the only cause of you, and God is the cause of you, and the cause of your brother, and the cause of your other brother, and the cause of your other brother. We're all caused by God together from one Father's principle, one parental causer or creator is the only cause of all of us. That one creator simultaneously creates all of us as equals, and therefore in the natural family structure in heaven, God is the creator or the father, and we are the children. Children do not cause each other. Children do not create each other. Children are not fathers of each other, and you are not the child of some other brother. This is the natural the natural family structure in heaven. This is the only functional, correctly functioning family structure, is to have one unified parent and everyone else is equal. So when you get into the physical world and you have various other relationship structures where you've got human parents, two parents, not one, who are supposedly the cause of you. That is not true. God is the only cause of you. They produce siblings, and you start having sibling rivalry and being attacked by each other and try to have power struggles with each other and cause harm to each other. That is illusion also. You're not supposed to be perceiving that you can be attacked by or attack your brother, because that is an idea of causality. You are not the cause of your brothers and sisters. Therefore, if you're sane, you should not be experiencing them as though they are the cause of you, or they can do anything to you, or that you can do anything to anyone else. And any children that you seem to have in this life are not really your children. They are other brothers who are creations of God, who are your equals. And just because they came out of a body, or you gave birth to them through your body, that was the ego trying to set up a hierarchy of illusions to suggest that you as a parent are more, you have authority over them, and you own them, and you control them, and you're dominating of them, and you choose everything for them. You are this I think the Course said this was set up so that you could learn about having a fatherhood quality to yourself, because you are a creator in heaven. But the children that you have in bodies in this world are not your creations in heaven. In heaven you have children, but they're not the direct children of God. They are descendants of you, and they don't incarnate. They are your creations, but they're not the direct sons of God that God directly created. The children that you have in this world, or your parents, are your brothers, and the only way to have not a dysfunctional relationship with any of these people is to relate to them as perfect equals. So So you did not cause your children. You did not cause your parents. You did not cause your brothers and sisters. And this applies also beyond your immediate family to every other person who has a soul, where the only true way to relate to them is a holy relationship where the two of you are equal sons of God. Doesn't matter if they seem to give birth to you, doesn't matter if you gave birth to them, doesn't matter if they were born from other families, from a different race or country, doesn't matter how old they are, doesn't matter if you think they're your grandparents or your grandchildren, or how long your family line has been going on with various stages of development. If it's your great-great-great-great-grandfather and mother, they still are your equal brothers in the family of God, in the only sane way of relating to them is as your equal brother. So if you look at human relationships and special relationships, and you see all the ways that we have issues issues with people, you will find that every single one of these issues is based on a distortion of God's hierarchy. It is always something to do with this person has power over me, I caused them, they caused me, we're not equals, they have more authority than I do, I'm the subservient child who has to obey and do everything my parents tell me. All of these things are dysfunctional. The only way to function correctly is in holiness and perfect equality, in which you recognize that all of your siblings, even your spouse is your sibling. You have to acknowledge that your husband or your wife is actually your brother or sister in terms of God's reality. And now that sounds weird, but when you don't acknowledge the structure of God's family units and God's children, you will enter into distortions of causality, and you'll start blaming others, and you'll start thinking that people cause you and that you're caused by them, and people do things to you that you don't want, or they have power over you, or you were able to do something to others, or somebody else is your responsibility, or you're to blame for how your children turned out, or your children are to blame for how they turned out, or senses of dependency between children and parents, where the child, a lot of people will not really get out from underneath this human family structure where the parent always has to stay being a parent and the child is always a child, and the parent can never really see the child as an equal, and the child never fully grows up and gets past their inferiority complex and becomes equal with the parent, effectively dissolving the typical family structure by getting to the point where we're all equals. You're supposed to be equal with every other person that exists. Doesn't matter what kind of a family you're in, or what the tradition is, or how much we think it's the normal family structure, or it's the legal structure, or the way that everybody does it. If it's not in line with God's causal relationships, it will become dysfunctional. And a lot of people do not really challenge this, and they don't grow up, and they don't get out from under the thumb of the parents, and the parents cannot let go of the role of being a parent, because they've identified with that role, and they don't want to stop being a mother or a father, and the child doesn't want to stop being a child, and keeps on accusing the parent of being lacking and insufficient, and It's their responsibility for whether you have a good life or not, and trying to appease them and trying to make them proud and trying to get their approval. All these things, they're all dysfunctional. That you're not supposed to get the approval of your brothers. You're not supposed to be in awe of your brothers. You're not supposed to be a lesser being than any other being that exists. And so when you see yourself as being that, and you're not able to become equal and holy with all other people, and you're staying stuck in specialness and special relationships, which are all based on exclusivity and having an exclusive ownership over a person or whatever, and saying, this is my family. These are ego families. They're contractions and limitations and ways of living in isolation and excluding others to say, we're the special ones, we're the ones who are approved, and the other ones are not part of our group. That's exclusion. That's attack. And it attacks the sonship. It is not what God intended. And so even though we've been sort of put into family situations where we initially seem to be set up as fully dependent on a parent, or the parent is dependent on the child, or whatever, sibling rivalries and power struggles and specialness and all this stuff, that's the challenge. That's the illusory structure to begin with. You're not supposed to stay in that. You're supposed to learn why that is dysfunctional and get back to relating to everyone in the same way. That's the only way that you can be unconditionally loving. People like to believe that they're unconditionally loving, but if you really challenge it and you say, well, do you love that enemy over there who is part of a terrorist group trying to kill people? Do you love them as much as you love your daughter? Do you love this murderous, hateful, vengeful person over here, this rapist? Do you love them as much as you love your son? Or as much as you love your parents? And probably most people will say no, because they don't really have fully unconditional love, because that would have to mean we cannot have any separate differences in our relationships. There cannot be any specialness, and there cannot be exclusivity. We have to all be part of the same family, and we have to all be equals. No matter what age you are, no matter how aware you are, how much knowledge you have, how much you've learned, whether you're a child that's just been born or a very old person, if there are dynamics going on that work against the flatness of and the equality of all of God's children, it will create various forms of dysfunction, and special relationships will arise out of it, and there will be angst, and there will be strife and struggles, and you cannot have peace unless you're in a holy relationship with all of creation. And God says the only way to enter into a real relationship, a holy relationship with any of your brothers, regardless of whether they seem to be brothers or sisters or uncles or grandparents or children, is to love all of them equally. The only way to fully love one of God's children is to accept that that child is exactly, perfectly identical and equal with every other being that God created, and therefore the same love that you would give to them, you would give to every other being, and love them all equally. That's the only sane, healthy relationship that you can have with others. And it does fly in the face of all human structures of relationships and specialness and family units and all this stuff. It transcends all of it, and that's why it's the challenge, is when you get into these families, you're supposed to learn to become unconditionally loving. You get into the family because you're not unconditionally loving, and you have to learn how to dissolve that artificial structure so that you all become equals again as children of God. You're all primarily children of God first, on an equal footing, no matter what age you are, no matter how much you've learned or how experienced you are or how important you think you are. And as Jesus says in the course, you are not supposed to own children. You're not supposed to have this idea of I own somebody, because that is the same thing as saying you are the cause of them, which is not true. In addition to being tyrannical over them and having power over them and taking away their freedom and their rights and their free will and making them subservient slaves, that is not how you treat children. And that's not how Jesus would advocate it either. And so what's this got to do with nothing real can be threatened? Well, in truth, in God's permanent creation, He's the Father, we are all the children, and we are all supposed to be equals. And because we have only been caused by God and not by each other, there is no such thing as horizontal cause and effect, or causality on the same level between the beings that are on the same level. They do not cause each other. So one brother does not cause another brother to change, because that brother cannot be changed because he's real. Nothing real can be threatened. Who you really are cannot be affected by anyone else. So when you are getting into the belief that other people do stuff to you, or you cause them, or they're having an effect on you, they're changing you, they're making you different, producing reactions in you, making you upset or hurt or whatever, that cannot be true, because that's based on the belief that they are the cause of you. And for them to be the cause of you, they have to be your father. And they are not your father. Your brothers and sisters are not your parents. And even your earthly parents are not your parents. They are your brothers. And if you acknowledge that, and you acknowledge, okay, God has created a perfect real being over here and another perfect real being over here, and He's created you perfect and real, all of causality comes from a level above to the level below. God is the cause, you are the effect. If we are to have no level confusion, we cannot believe that anything on this level is the cause of anything else here. The cause is above. The cause is God. All brothers and sisters and children of God are equals. Therefore, there is literally no parental causality between brothers. Other people do not cause you, cannot become your cause. So if you're believing that other people are doing stuff to you, you are in denial of the fact that your real self cannot be caused by that person. You're pretending that there is a cause coming from them, making you change or defining what you are or affecting you in some way. It is not true. It's you must be deluded. You must be misperceiving. And every form of artificial causality is always the same thing as attack. So if you're trying to cause God, that's attack. If you're trying to cause your brother, that's attack. If your brother tries to cause you, that's attack. So real causality is not experienced as attack because it's natural. There's a natural causality from God, and you cause your creations in heaven. That's natural. But if you start trying to insist that there is cause coming from a brother toward you, or cause going from you to a brother, or you're not equal to other people in some way, you literally are trying to insist that there's a causality there that doesn't exist. So you're having to try to force it, trying to make a connection between two people that doesn't exist, and it's attacking, and it is going against nature, the nature of God's creation, and so it's experienced as unnatural and harmful and hurtful because it is not true. Anything untrue will be experienced as suffering. So nothing real can be threatened has to include the fact that you are real, not in your body, but you as a son of God are real. Your brother is also real. There is people out there. Bodies are illusions, but the people in the bodies are not. God has many children, so acknowledging their free will is part of this, and acknowledging that because you are free and you have free will, you're free from the will of your brothers. If they choose to go into imprisonment of will by trying to attack you, they must be failing to attack you. If you buy into the illusion of it and say, yes, you really are doing an attack and it really is your fault, you really are the one that's wrong, you're deluded because you're denying your free will. You're denying that you're free from them and going into imprisonment yourself. So what you are is real. You are a spirit. You are a mortal spirit. You cannot be changed. You cannot sin. Nothing real can be threatened means that the idea of sin is a lie. You literally cannot do something to God. God is permanent and real and fixed and absolutely immovable. You cannot affect him in any way. So the idea that you sinned has to be a bullshit lie, and it has to be an idea of something that's impossible, that cannot be true. So every single part of your belief that you've sinned is a lie. It's fake sin. There is no such thing as real sin. Because you literally cannot sin. You cannot offend God. You cannot hurt him. You cannot will against his will. If you try to will against his will, as I described earlier, your will becomes weakened and withdraws and isolates and becomes imprisoned and fails to do anything. Got some sound effects today. So the same applies to your brothers. You cannot sin against your brother. You cannot access his reality in a hurtful way. You cannot reach the love that he is and attack that love unless you are communicating with him through love and therefore becoming intimate with him enough to be able to be close enough to him to do anything to him. As soon as you try to attack him, you will withdraw from him and become isolated and imprisoned in a body, proving that you cannot sin against other people. Other people cannot sin against you. And what this leads to is if you can admit to this and you can acknowledge that literally no one has ever done anything to you, you have never done anything to anyone else, you have never done anything to God, God has never hurt you, there are no connectors between you and other people that are not based on love. Any forms of attack are forms of a breakdown in communication, so they are separating you from others, causing their attack not to reach you. You literally are not able to be accessed by anyone unless it's in a loving way. And you are perfectly safe, you are perfectly protected, you are perfectly invulnerable, and therefore you are literally out of reach of the egos of other people. You're out of reach of all forms of horizontal cause and effect, even the laws of physics. You cannot be caused by other things on this level. So if you acknowledge this to yourself, anything that happened in my past where it seemed like other people did something to me that cannot have been true, they literally cannot have done anything to who I really am. Who I really am cannot have been accessed by them, therefore they did not attack me, they never hurt me, they could not do anything to who I really am. The person that I thought they were able to attack was not who I really am. It's an illusion of myself that I thought I was somebody that I'm not. And right now, I am not able to be accessed by anyone else at the same level, by any other brother, has no access to me at all unless they come in love. So there literally are no justifications and no reasons in which you can prove or should believe that anything can happen to you against your will. Nobody else can cause you. You are not the cause of anyone else. You cannot change their reality. Their reality cannot be threatened by you. Your reality cannot be threatened by anyone else. Therefore, you're kind of almost like isolated from or free from the effects of everything else. Therefore, anything that you are experiencing, you must have done it to yourself. This is the secret to salvation, that once you cut away the illusions of this bullshit lie that other people can cause you, and just remember, at all times, I cannot be affected by anyone else. Anything that I am experiencing cannot have come from them. Therefore, I have to own up to 100% responsibility for having put this in myself. Anything I'm experiencing, I must have done it to myself. If I'm upset, I must have chosen to be upset. If I'm sick, I must have made myself sick. If I'm dying, I am trying to kill myself. If I'm unhappy in any way, I wanted to be unhappy. And when you remember the prayer, I must have made a wrong decision because I'm not at peace. I made the decision myself, but I can choose otherwise. I want to choose otherwise because I want to be at peace. It acknowledges that every single thing you're experiencing must have been your decision. You must have chosen it, and with no exceptions. You cannot have exclusions and special cases and somebody else did this and that person caused this. Every single thing you are experiencing, you are choosing it. And only by owning up to this, which requires you to acknowledge that others are not the cause of you ever, Only by that ownership can you gain access to the freedom to choose again and decide that you do not want to suffer and therefore do not make yourself suffer. This is how you overcome death, by not choosing to die. One of the quotes that I love in the Course is, no one can die unless he chooses to do so. No one dies without their own consent. Where literally, if you're in this position in the hierarchy of God's creation, where you are a permanent being who is real and cannot be threatened, and other brothers cannot cause you in any way, shape, or form, nothing can cause anything to happen to you unless you're the one that makes it happen, and therefore you are free from all other victimhood, and nothing can happen to you without your own consent. So you cannot become sick unless you make yourself sick. You cannot die unless you cause your own death. And as the Course says, the ego loves to attack the thing, the body, that it thinks is the temple in which it is protected from God by separation. It attacks it and kills it for its allegiance. And if you did not choose to make yourself dead, your body would not be able to become dead. So you've got to, once you get rid of all these bullshit lies about other causes, there's an outside cause, or it's the environment, or it's the neighbors, or someone's doing this to me, or my body has a mind of its own, or whatever reasons you think there are that could cause you to be dead against your will, it's bullshit. You cannot suffer unless you choose it. And only in the ownership of that truth are you owning up to the reality that you cannot be threatened. Nothing real can be threatened, so if I'm real, I cannot be threatened. That means death cannot happen to me, and sickness doesn't just show up on its own. And if I'm unhappy, I must have wanted to be unhappy. If I think I'm unhappy because of somebody else or what they're doing or what they said or whatever, that's not why I'm unhappy. I decided I'm going to be unhappy now. And that, I know that seems insane, doesn't it? Like, we would deliberately choose consciously to want to suffer. That is the secret to salvation, is realizing that we do this. We go out of our right mind into insanity and deliberately attack ourselves to make ourselves unhappy on purpose, so that we can complain and suffer and then blame it on somebody else, where all along we are the one who did it to ourselves. And if this is 100% true, which it is, it also means if you choose not to die, there's no one else can choose for you. Death cannot occur. If you choose not to be sick, sickness cannot appear. If you do not attack your brothers, you will not become sick. If you do not try to be separate from them, you will not foster separation and induce illness. The choice is yours. So like the power is the power of decision, that you are in charge of choosing everything you experience, and no one else chooses for you. So you, in your real state, cannot be threatened. You are real. And even when you try to hurt yourself and you do stuff to yourself and make yourself seem to suffer and cause your own sickness, even that does not affect your real self. Your real self and your reality and your truth about yourself is safe from your own self-attack. Even when it's not attack from others and it's coming from you, you cannot attack the Son of God. You cannot hurt what God created. Your real self has been saved for you in its perfect condition, free from sin, free from its attack, and free from death. You cannot make it die. So even when you're trying to, even when you're choosing death and suffering, you are not really attacking that which is unattackable. You're only attacking an illusory self, or producing an illusion of self to try to replace your real self and make this artificial self aligned with the body, make it seem to die, to pretend that you're killing the Son of God, when in fact the Son of God is perfectly safe and cannot be killed. You cannot hurt God's creation. And isn't that a relief? That you literally are incapable of sinning against God's creation. But you can deny it. You can pretend otherwise. So in truth, you cannot be attacked by anyone else or by yourself. If you think you're being attacked even by yourself, you must be deluded. You're in denial because you're not admitting to and owning up to your invulnerability, and you're pretending that you've been attacked. And any upset or suffering that you have, you are make-believing that you are suffering for a reason and that you have a good reason to do so, and that it's real suffering and it's really changing you and making you different. That is delusional. It is hallucination. It is insanity, because what you really are is permanent, immortal spirit, perfect, divine, holy, healthy, happy, cannot be affected, cannot be changed. There's nothing you can do to it. There's nothing you can do to hurt yourself in a real way. And when you try to hurt yourself, you go away from yourself and go into an illusion of ego identity. God wouldn't allow you to be able to really harm yourself, and He's made sure that you're permanent. You are permanently protected in God's kingdom. Nothing can hurt you in reality. You cannot ever die. You can never really be sick. So anything else that is showing up otherwise, any other suffering, must be your bullshit. It has to be lies. It must be not true. It's not real. Nothing real can be threatened. Everything else is unreal, and it doesn't exist. Your sickness doesn't exist. Your suffering doesn't exist. Your unhappiness doesn't exist. Your fights with your neighbors and your family members does not exist. Causality coming from other people does not exist. The special relationships that you think you have do not exist. The only thing that's real is completely, permanently unthreatenable, is what God has created. God, heaven, children of God, the creations of the children of God, the angels that God created. None of that can be threatened. None of it can be changed. None of it is afraid of threat. None of it's in danger. It's just permanently celebrating and knowing perfect peace in knowing that there is no threat. There is nothing to be protected from. The ego doesn't exist. Nothing has happened. There is no real separation. Nothing can threaten reality, and only the kingdom of God is real, only heaven is real, only the creations of light are real. There is no life outside of heaven, and all this stuff in this world is bullshit illusion. So if you can get that picture where only light is real, there is no darkness, there is no ego, there is no world. There's only the world of light, which is heaven that God created. There is no death, there is only life. There's only life, only truth, only light, only love. That is the only reality, and it's perfectly safe and perfectly at peace, can never be attacked. You have not attacked it, and you never will be able to. You might as well give up trying and accept that it's the only truth. There's nothing you can do about it. You cannot change God's mind. You don't have a say in whether you're worthy or not. You're permanently worthy. And acknowledging that brings you relief, and it brings you peace, knowing that there is nothing else. There's only reality. There's only God's creation, and that creation is permanent. It is not in danger. It can't be threatened, so it has no opposite. So why are we upset? Why are we afraid? Why are we worried? Why are we concerned that we've gone off the rails, or can't get back to God, or have done something really bad? You need not be afraid. Be not afraid, because only God's creation is real. And you cannot die. Only life is real, only resurrection is real, only God's truth is real. Everything else is just a weird dream of scary seeming things seeming to happen that are not really happening, have no lasting effects, and doesn't exist. There is only heaven. There is only God's kingdom. That is the only reality. We are still in God's kingdom, pretending not to be. This world is inside of the kingdom, a dream. You're in heaven dreaming of exile. And when the dream's over, the dream is gone, and it doesn't exist. It never did. You just were making some stuff up. So we're literally making up all these dramas and all these illusions and all these special relationships and attacks and problems and deaths and murders and sicknesses. None of it matters. It doesn't exist. So nothing real can be threatened. So you're safe. You don't have to worry. Nothing real can be threatened. You're safe. And nothing unreal exists. And herein lies the peace of God and the peace of heaven and the peace of all of God's children and all of your brothers and all of your creations. Everything is at peace. Knowing that there is no danger, there's no threat. Only love is real. I'm going to stop there, and till next time, remember to laugh and not take this illusion seriously, and remember that you're safe and loved, and therefore you cannot be hurt because you're real, and nothing can affect you, not even your brothers, not even yourself. You can't do anything wrong, you cannot sin, you have not sinned, so you must still be innocent. And that means God still loves you. God bless.